Welcome back. Eskom's Chief Transmission Executive, Segomoco Scheppers, has told Parliament that higher stages of power cuts could be necessary to avoid a total collapse of the grid. That comes as South Africa is currently battling between 8 to 12 hours of daily power cuts. Scheppers says that his task is to prevent a full-on blackout.
Our task is to make sure that we avoid that, to the honourable members, and the pain of load shedding that reduces demand to match available supply is what we are always working to balance every second of the day. And our task is to avoid that, and it may mean higher stages of load shedding if necessary, and if we can't avoid it, but that's what we need to do to maintain the system in balance.
For more on that, let's speak to the South African National Energy Development Institute's Professor Sampson Mamphweli. Prof, a very good evening to you. Thankful for your time. So, Mr. Scheppers talks about the task of ensuring that the country does not reach the point of a total blackout. How well is Eskom doing in avoiding that?
Good evening, Tembekile and the viewers. So far, they've done well. Unfortunately, they are doing well is basically implementing load shedding and implementing higher stages of load shedding. And what he has said is the reality. We recently had a total grid collapse in one of the neighboring countries. I think it was a day before yesterday or yesterday. And that was because they didn't manage their grid properly. So it becomes very difficult to control it and to manage the grid, especially when we go to higher stages of load shedding, when the demand is too high, much higher than the supply, the electricity that we're able to produce. And that is what we're seeing now when we look at the numbers. The breakdowns are too high. We're sitting at between 18,000 and 20,000 megawatts, with partial load losses sitting at about 3,400 megawatts. Eskom also needs some generation reserves. So if you look at all that and you look at the fact that we're moving towards peak demand that will be reaching as high as 38,000 megawatts, we will be having a shortage of between 9,500 to 10,000 megawatts, which would necessitate much higher stages of load shedding. We could go up to about stage 10 load shedding if nothing changes between now and then.
And there's been an interpretation, and I'm reading that apparently that's not the right interpretation, that the higher we are in the stages of these power cuts, especially for longer periods, the closer we are to a collapse of the grid. What is the technical understanding? Am I right to say that some of your colleagues who said that's the wrong interpretation are in fact telling the truth?
They are actually telling the truth, because what happens is, for us to maintain grid stability, as things stand, the Eskom system operator is struggling with this grid as it is. The higher the load shedding stages, the difficulty it becomes to balance. And that balance, technically, you're looking at the balance between a number of factors: your inertia, your grid frequencies, your grid voltages. All those things need to be properly balanced, and that balance it also needs to be worked into the various supply sources. You've got your base load coming from the coal and the nuclear and other sources, and then you've got your variable renewable energy sources. So the system operator needs to strike that balance and ensure that we don't go too high in terms of the frequencies and the voltages, or we don't go too low. And that balance it becomes the higher the demand with low supply, the more it becomes difficult to maintain that balance. And when they say the grid has collapsed, it's basically the collapse of those aspects that I've mentioned.
And would it be, or could it be, something that happens by surprise or catches Eskom by surprise, or would a grid collapse, for example, be able to be something that happens at a level, at a pace at which officials would be able to anticipate a problem?
So the way Eskom manages the grid, they've got very advanced systems in terms of managing the grid. Never mind the fact that we currently sitting in this kind of a situation. And I've heard that when the grid collapsed in Botswana, it was Eskom that assisted because we've got the technical capabilities to be able to do that. So in terms of tracking all these aspects that could lead to a grid collapse, Eskom has got very good systems that they can export even to other countries and use those kind of systems to track the grid. I can't see a situation where a grid collapse could happen without Eskom picking it up. I would see a situation where they would pick it up, maybe few hours before it could happen, and then all they would do is to put us into much higher stages of load shedding.
And in the worst case scenario, if the grid did collapse altogether, how long would it take to restore services? Because a piece I was looking at earlier said we may see a scenario, for instance, where power has to be restored station by station.
Yes, so it takes quite a long time, especially for the grid that we have in South Africa. We have a quite extensive grid. We are the most advanced power system in the African continent. So if it collapses, our estimations is that it will take about 2 weeks to resuscitate it, and if the grid collapses, then there are quite a lot of negative consequences. Life basically will come to a standstill. You won't have proper supply of food. You won't have proper supply. The network will collapse. The cell phone towers will collapse in terms of the network. The petrol and the diesel, you will run out of those in power stations. So basically, the cost of living becomes way too high, and in some cases, it will become very difficult for people to basically live in the country.
Professor Sampson Mamphweli, great to have your time, and thank you for your insights.